Hey all you whiskey fans, have you ever thought about aging some whiskey in a little barrel like this? Well, I like where your head's at, but before you do, let's grab a glass and talk about it. So what's important to keep in mind when you're thinking about aging some whiskey in a barrel is A, why do you want to do it? To be very honest, when I first started, it was just kind of to experiment and figure out what will whiskey taste like if I continue to age it. And that's cool, it's not wrong, but I want to give you some tips so that you can get even more out of it and put a little bit more thought into it when you're going to do it or try to do it. For starters, this will sound a little bit kind of different to what we all think, but angel share is not good. I know that in many times the whiskey which is filled in a barrel and is lost over time is thought of as something which is like amazing, and hey, the angels are really benefiting from something crazy, very good and tasty. But that's not always the case. If you've been able to visit a distillery and you've been lucky enough to try some of their, if you're in Scotland, new make, but if you're in the US, just to kind of distill it, you're probably going to notice it doesn't taste so good. Now, again, depending on where you had it during the cut, it's going to be better or worse, but if you're trying a glass of it all the way at the end, it's quite interesting. The idea behind this is that a distiller usually fills a barrel with a little bit of, I'm going to call it overkill, too much heads, maybe too much tails in there, and it doesn't necessarily taste good before it's aged. So what does that mean if you're trying to fill a barrel like this at home? Well, it means that if you take just any, let's say, off-the-shelf whiskey and decide, hey, I'm going to put this in a barrel, you got to keep that in mind. A few things have changed. Number one, this whiskey has been diluted. It's 40% ABV, A, and B, it's also already matured. What I mean by matured is whatever this whiskey was when it was distilled, before it went into the barrel, it tasted very different. Not because of the wood, but because of all the alcohols which were there, which have disappeared or evaporated, became angel share, whatever you want to call it, over time. So when you at home are picking up a barrel and thinking, hey, what whiskey should I fill it with? I'm going to give you some tips. For starters, have a vision. Have some type of goal on what you want this whiskey to be like. I'll give you an example. Buffalo Trace is a beloved whiskey. I know it's not easy to get everywhere, but for those of you which are lucky enough to get it, it's a very good, very smooth whiskey. Emphasis on smooth, sweet, caramely notes, kind of what you expect from a bourbon, but not a lot of wood. Of course, I mean, this is a non-age statement. This is straight bourbon, so I'm guessing it's about 3 to 4 years, whatever is in this blend, but not a lot more. That means that we don't have a whole lot of wood influence, although it's unused American white oak. We might want to add something to it. We might want to add some more wood aromas, some kind of age imitation to it. If that is the goal, then picking up a small barrel like this is probably a good idea, because very quickly are we able to add some wood notes to it. Now, here's the catch. If you think that without a specific note in mind, that the whiskey is just going to get better by itself, that's not going to happen. What you can do is supplement or add to a whiskey, or even in some cases take away, but what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Again, whiskey like this, I want to taste a little bit more oaky, pick up a small barrel. Now you can do it. Cool. So you have some idea of what whiskey you want, what the flavor you want to taste like, and you have a barrel. Also keep in mind the ABV of the whiskey that goes into it. As a basic rule of thumb, and I'm saying heavily simplified, the less ABV you have, in this case it's 40, yeah exactly, 40, the more sweet notes you're going to pick out of a barrel. On the contrary, the more ABV you have, and you're probably not going to find any young barrel strength whiskeys that you're gonna, or single barrel whiskeys that you're gonna want to put in a barrel and change. But if you did, the more ABV you have, the more likely you are to pick up more wood tannins, more kind of woody, dry aromas. So just keep that in mind. Lower ABV, you're gonna get more sweet than wood. Higher ABV, you're gonna get more like the deep woody notes, those tannins, a little bit of that wood burn that I find in the back of my throat. Now, okay, you have a plan, you have your whiskey, your goal is to achieve something out in the future. Perfect. What barrel should you pick up? Okay, well this gets very interesting. So as you can see here, I have a very small barrel. I want to say this is about 2 liters. You can probably see back here, I've got many, many more barrels. So I've got this big one here, another one down here, and all the way down here, there's even another one. There's even one all the way back there, if you can see it. These are my small ones. I've got, of course, bigger ones, which I'm making with March Distilling, my distillery. But for the average person, a small barrel, anywhere from 2 liters to 5 liters, you really gotta be careful. And I mean this with all honesty because I've made the mistake, and I hope that you're watching this video. This means you're not gonna make the same mistake I made. Do not buy a cheap barrel. This, my friends, is a cheap barrel. Doesn't matter how long you leave it in water to fill up all the leaks. Doesn't matter how much, and you can kind of see this here, how much wax you use to seal it around the whole barrel. Doesn't matter. This is a horrific piece of wood. This barrel cost me around 100 or 200, I think about $100. Bigger ones maybe more. But it's not cheap, but it's really not good. For starters, what I did not know when I was using this barrel is it is not charred. It is just wood. It's probably not even toasted. And as I'm sure you are aware, almost all bourbon barrels are, and almost all whiskey barrels are charred and toasted on the inside. This means you're going to get some really different flavors than what you're expecting. But B, as you can see when I open this, there's a whole bunch of wax inside. I did not add that. This wax, this interior, is how the whiskey barrel was delivered to me. So before you just walk into a store or go pick up a barrel, really keep in mind, who am I buying it from, and is this a quality product? This project of trying to age your own whiskey is not worth it if you're not investing 100% in A, the research, and B, finding the right barrel. Sadly, I don't have good advice for you on where to find your good barrel. I think it's really going to be hit or miss depending on where you are, and the smaller barrels you want to find, it's even harder to do that. So really, just look around and search for one. Before I would age a whiskey in a barrel, what I would actually do is break apart a barrel or a piece of wood, go find some high quality wood, and take a stave. This stave you can then char or burn, doesn't matter. You can put this in your oven and you can heat it up in your oven to kind of get that toasted wood aroma and flavor. I have a little garden torch where I used to kind of like torch my weeds, and that's what I actually use to toast my barrels. So it doesn't matter how you do it, you can put it in your fireplace for all I care. But what's important is you want to have a good piece of wood and you want to add some toast or some char to it. Then it's okay to wash it off. If there's soot, if there's dirt from wherever you did it, wash it off to make sure it's clean, and then add this to your whiskey. I should also mention, if you're experimenting, please do not experiment with something expensive. I mean, this in where I got it, the Buffalo Trace, is around $40, so I'm kind of okay to experiment with it. However, personally, I would look for something more with more ABV before I did. What is probably a better thought is to pick up some moonshine. Now this is of course our March Distilling moonshine, but it doesn't matter. Pick up any moonshine you want and make sure it's over 50, or in the ballpark, I'd say 50 ABV. Because depending on how long you have it in the barrel, and we'll talk about how long you should or should not, but you're going to lose ABV. And you're going to lose a lot more whiskey than you think. So when you fill this with 2 liters, that's roughly 3.8 liters to a gallon, you're going to lose quite a bit of it. And you're going to lose alcohol too, depending on where you've stored it and what conditions you've stored it in. Personally, I prefer, if you can manage it, and it's a small barrel, so I hope you can, to store it in a dry, non-humid place. What this will do is that you will lose less alcohol, and if you lose any volume, it's going to be more water than alcohol. So you keep your ABV plus minus at the same point. Maybe you go up, you're probably going to go down a little bit, but you're going to be in that same ballpark. Versus if you are, let's say you put it in your garage, and it can get warm in your garage and it's also wet. Humidity is the destroyer of ABV. This is why you get so many barrel picks or barrel releases from the UK, from Scotland, from Ireland, from all around the world, and the ABV is less than 60%. This is also why sometimes in the US you get whiskeys which are more than 60%. This is all to do with the temperature and the climate around that barrel. Now, I know we covered a lot of things. I hope I didn't scare you. I hope I didn't make this feel like it's a lost cause, because it isn't. You will probably not be satisfied with your first try. You probably won't be satisfied with your second or third try. But the fact that you're trying is already amazing, and you should keep doing it and trying it. Because once you've tried to perform a task like aging whiskey, you better understand and better appreciate what a master distiller or a master blender has to go through in order to make a damn good bottle. Because it's not easy. Maybe chance, it may be luck, but at one point it's experimenting so much that you figure out what recipe fits your tastes and the tastes of your consumers. Us. So with that, I deeply advise buying a good barrel, having a plan of what you want the finished whiskey to taste like, and picking up some whiskey that you think, hey, I can add maybe some woody notes to, or taking a product which is not aged at all and thinking, okay, let me try to age it, let me see what this is going to taste like. And finally, experiment. When the first one doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter. Try it again. And if all else fails, and you have a wood barrel, do not throw this away afterwards. Yes, it is ex-bourbon at the point that you fill it the first time, but maybe put some port wine in it. Maybe some sherry. And now you have a sherry or port wine barrel that you can put some whiskey in. Hey, there's no limits to your creativity and how much you can play around with and blend whiskeys. We see this all the time with all the different whiskey manufacturers out there making so many different variations and so many delicious types of whiskey to try and to love. So with that, I like where your head's at. Keep going in this direction. Cheers to you and your next glass of whiskey. Maybe you've aged it yourself. Bye now.